Welcome back. If you joined us for part one, I'm so glad you're here for part two. And if you're just jumping in, you may want to go back and start there. Either way, let's dive in. You've built your career on really understanding people, not just their experience, but where they'll actually thrive. So I've got a couple questions for you in the land of recruiter, etc. So what do you look for in someone that doesn't show up on a resume? That's the first question. And then I've got a second I've got a part two. So let's start with that. What do you look for in someone that is not showing up on a resume, that isn't just like, oh, these are all the accolades I've had in throughout my career.
So, first of all, I think I do have to take a step back to the resume first, and I'll tell you why that's relevant. Is we can't see a personality from across the room sometimes, unfortunately, right? But sometimes you can, right? And with a resume, sometimes we can see talent very easily on a resume, but other times you can't. So, what I'm trying to do with a resume and when I meet someone is what is the story of that person, right? So, on the resume, of course, I'm looking for does someone have a history of success? Does someone have accomplishments? Does their story seem to make sense? But when I meet with someone, sometimes I'll see a background, I'll think, okay, it's okay. It's not what I really need, but it's okay. I still want to have a conversation. And then you talk to the person and they blow you away. This is what I'm looking for is someone have reasons? Are they introspective for why things maybe haven't gone the way that they've gone? Do they take responsibility for that? So let's say someone saw that I got demoted. That doesn't look like someone with a history of success, but I took responsibility for the actions I took that caused that to happen and showed how I learned from those situations. So to me, if you got let go at a job or you're going like this, and all of a sudden you do the sideways thing, you always wanted to, open your own, brewery. And then 2 years later, you're like, "I shouldn't open a brewery. I need to get back to, commercial, real estate." Someone be honest and forthcoming about their story? But also, how do we see people's internal strength? And it's also to me, like, I talk to a lot of people that will say, I really wanna move up," right? There's a lot of mid-career people. "I really wanna move up. I really wanna do more." But then the number one thing they say that they want besides that is work-life balance. And I try to explain to him, you can have work-life balance, but you have to decide, is it just you want flexibility, but you're willing to put in more? Or is work-life balance more important and maybe you don't want to move up as much? And I'm not saying you have to kill yourself to move up. That is not the case. But I think to me, I try to find people who understand if they want something, what do they need to do to get it? But also to recognize too is what are the strengths that each individual person has, right? So let's say this is not on a resume. Let's say I was interviewing you, right? Even if I mean nothing about your background or your resume, I can tell you're an empathetic person, that you're a super driven person. But I can just tell that from talking to you. So I really get a sense from people of what is it that they really want and how can they really thrive. I think we use the word thrive a lot, but I think that's one thing that our firm, Korn Ferry, does from a really big picture perspective and assesses leaders. But to me, I'm really trying to assess where will someone really do well, and then how does that match what the company is going to be able to do well.
I think that's good though too, that you're also helping them, when you're what you're looking for that doesn't show up on the resume, but that you're looking for those special little glimmers, but also that you're setting expectations correctly with people. Because I think sometimes people are so like, I want I they think in their mind, that same uphill line straight up, and they don't really think about necessarily what kind of sacrifices it means to do that. But then also, like, I love that you're setting expectations right out of the gate, because I think also that is pivotal for people when they're trying to make decisions in transition. So from one role to the next, having someone like you really ask those questions and set expectations, it might be something that totally changes the trajectory of somebody's career. And they're probably like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad she asked that," or "I'm so glad she made that point clear to me because I hadn't thought of it that way. And now I'm totally redirecting what I'm doing in my career or in my life."
There's a place for every person. I really believe that. And some people want to work for what I call like tell mom company, right? They want to work at Nike or they want to work at Apple or Vail Resorts, wherever it is. And those are all amazing companies, but is that amazing company for you? right? And what I mean by that is I work with this really, really brilliant, she's a controller, and she has young kids, and she wants a job where she's really going to add value, but she really can't work these huge hours based on the age of her kids. So we found this amazing company that is a great company, and they're growing, but they're growing very, very slowly. And their accounting was already set up, so she doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. And this is a great role where she can add value. She can have some challenge, but it's not going to be a startup and so much challenge where she's working 100-hour weeks, is that's not going to match her, right? At this time in her career. So that doesn't mean she needs to take a step back, but it's also really being honest with ourselves. What is it that we really want? And for some people, it's like, yes, I want to work for Nike. Well, do you really want to work in an environment where there's, tens of thousands of people, or do you want to work in an environment where there's hundreds of people and you get to sit in conversations where decisions are being made? And I think I try to do that with candidates, of really trying to tease out where are they really going to be happy and what really makes sense given their life right now, versus people say things that they think based on the level of their career they should say.
Mhm.
And we
I
really want to focus on us as individuals.
Yeah, and I also think that, like, as you're going throughout your career, there are some transitions that you don't really think about. Like, for example, being part of a startup versus being part of a large corporation that's already rocking and rolling, right? Those are dramatically different roles and dramatically different expectations and responsibilities that even if your title is the same, they're just absolutely different. And same thing with working for profit versus nonprofit, totally different. And I just don't think that sometimes they think, oh, I fit that role and I'd be great for that role. I like on paper, everything makes sense. But I think when you really dig into it, somebody like you has the ability to really say, like, oh, wait, hold on. Like, here's some big differences that you're not thinking about right now, just like you were just saying, that I think makes a huge difference.
And does someone also really want it? Right? So you could be a great fit for a particular role, right? They need 10 things, you have 10 things. You're like, oh, I should want to go after that role. But does that make sense for you in your life right now? But also, too, is like, there's a lot of, I get contacted a lot about jobs, and there are some jobs that I could make much more money. I could work for, do a lot different things, but that's not a fit for who I am. And I really want to be in an environment where I feel like I can thrive. And, to me, do I want to start all over at my age right now? No, I do not. I want to I want to piggyback off of what I've already done. So again, I think the idea is there's a lot of things that we look at that are beyond the resume. And one thing I think is important is nowadays, because the market is so complicated, and I don't mean just the stock market. I think companies want to be able to see around the corner. They want to find leaders that can see around the corner more easily. So they believe that means I'm only going to hire from construction, or I'm only going to hire from real estate or oil and gas, whatever it is. And some industries, yes, you need to have. But I really try to get clients to look at the best athlete. How do we hire the right person, right? Person for the role, not someone that just checks off 10 boxes. So it also gives me, I think, some opportunities to get some people to be seen that wouldn't normally be seen. And not all companies agree to it, but I think part of it too is us as individuals looking at how can we be the best athlete for a particular role, instead of just looking at things that if you only want to be in their entertainment, we're only looking at entertainment.
Which brings me to my part two of my question, um, which is what things do you have like what things do you recommend for people's resumes? Because the shift is so dramatic in how the old resume, like how the old way we used to write resumes versus what they look like now. So what's your best advice for somebody on that's building the resume? Like, how do they make it look the best? How do they make it stand out to someone like you that's like looking at endless resumes, like they all kind of blur into one. So what's your best advice?
Hey, that's a really hard one. I'll tell you why it's a hard one. Is there's really two pieces. It depends if you know your resume is going to a person and you know your resume is going through an ATS system, because AI is such a part of so many companies hiring. So the problem is that you need to have all of these words and it's going through an ATS. You need to have a skills section. And anyone can look this up if you use Copilot, ChatGPT. What are the things that I need to have? The main thing too is never have AI write your resume. People can tell. Don't have them write anything that people can tell. You can use it to bolster what you're doing, which is amazing. But on resumes, part of it is very particular if it's going externally. But if you know it's going to a person, if you are at least mid-level to above career, you need to have an executive summary at the top or a professional summary at the top. You're saying, this is who I am, right? So for Carrie, for you, you would have your, it's not that serious, and what the value you bring, you're having all that on top in terms of what you can add value-wise. And then underneath that, you're going to have each of your jobs, but it's also, what are you accomplishing on your jobs? It is not a job description. It is, how do you really set yourself apart from someone else? But this is also showing, how well do you evaluate yourself? But sometimes I think people try to make it seem either too great or they get uncomfortable bragging about themselves. But you really should be able to tell someone's story. Now, one of the things that I think is important to bring up, especially I think for some of the listeners, is there is ageism. There is. I'm too old for some of my clients, which makes me laugh hysterically, in my personal opinion. But sometimes people are like leaving their 20 years of the career off or 10 years of their career off. I do feel differently than most people. You can't start your resume and let's say it's 2015 and you're already a BP and you write nothing else underneath it. Because as far as they know, you started your career in 1950 when you maybe just started your career in 1990. I don't know, whatever the case might be. But I do think we should be proud of the work we've done. But that doesn't mean give me 20 years of 20 lines of what you did 25 years ago. But it is also showing what our history is. So I'm sure I could go way more detail with that.
Yeah.
But at least gives you an idea.
No, that's really helpful. So like for somebody that's younger versus somebody that's older, what do you think, like are there particular tricks for like somebody that's younger that's starting out versus somebody that's older like that does have 20 plus years? Like you're saying don't put every job you ever had, right? We don't need to know what you did out of college, but how far back do they go? How do they know like, okay, I've listed VP and I listed the role I had right before that and then nothing else. And you're like, okay.
I
Or
think, in my opinion, you need to put the roles, but we don't need information about it. So sometimes, like if someone's more experienced, it might say prior experience, and it might say, Big Four public accounting, you're promoted from, a SAC to a senior audit manager, right? And that's one line. That's all you need to put. I do think it's important to show kind of showcase some of that, but you don't need to go into any detail with it. But when someone is younger, yes, you need to put all your jobs, but you don't need an executive summary or a summary at the top. I barely see it, but I do sometimes see young people doing objectives again. When you are interviewing, everything has to be about what you can do for the company, not what a company can do for you. Because people want to go in, we want it to be a two-way street. But the more we can tell someone what we can do for them, the more information they give you back about why this would be a fit for you. And it's just the way it is. And so when you put an objective or tell someone what you want, unfortunately, as much as we want to do that, it's just not going to behoove people. It's not going to make as much sense. So the idea to me still for someone lighter in their career or heavier in their career is really focusing from the accomplishment standpoint, really trying to also highlight, is this a company of you and two people, or is this a $6.5 billion company? Sometimes I interviewed someone the other day that was like a window fashions company. And I was like, oh, is this like a small company in Kansas? And she's like, we're like a $7.4 billion company. We sell to like Home Depot and Bose. And I was like, you should put that in your resume. Because it just made it seem like maybe what she was doing was small. And then when you realize it's bigger, it doesn't matter either way, but explaining, hey, this is a $20 million company. This is a $5.6 billion company. Both are valuable, but it also depends on who you're interviewing with. And does it sort of match some of those things they might have interest in?
gotcha. And I think that's really it's really eye-opening. I mean, I don't look at resumes all day anymore. I definitely have done that in parts of my career where I'm like, oh my God, if I see another resume. But so commend you there. But I think it's really a good point you make that get rid of the objectives and forget about what the company can do for you. Explain what you can do for the company as far as here's some of the amazing accomplishments I had in each role. I think that's really good advice, because I think a lot of people, whether it's an old habit of old resumes or just like, kind of like trying to make sure you match with the company. And so I think that's why a lot of people leave the objectives in there, but it's like, that's great advice and a great point that you make, because I would have never thought of that.
And Carrie, I'll tell you too, is one of the other traps people make when they get more experience, they just add the new job. They just keep adding a new job instead of refreshing. Look at the whole resume. What is still relevant? What is not relevant? What can I take off? What I'm also then adding. But also too, I have some quick advice for job seekers. If you're okay, if I just say that,
Yes, please.
because we
This is gold.
we don't want to be vulnerable, right? No one wants to be vulnerable. It's a horrible feeling. So when we are looking, and there's a lot of great people on the market right now, when we are looking for a new opportunity, we feel vulnerable because we're putting so many resumes out there and we're getting nothing back. And it's a horrible feeling. And then when we finally get an interview, we don't perform as well in that interview because we've been turned down by so many people. So we're almost talking ourselves out of it. We're putting so much pressure on ourselves for this one interview that this is the one that's got to stay. Part of it, in my opinion, people's efforts are going the wrong direction. Is they're sending their resume to anything remotely close. Or for me, Korn Ferry and we obviously advertised some of our roles. I was working on a director of finance and I kept getting these CFO resumes. They don't fit the job. And I think in the CFO's mind is like, well, maybe she'll see my resume, it'll be interesting. It's better to reach out to me on LinkedIn to say, hey, I've seen that you've been posting some roles. I'm the CFO with this kind of background. Let me know if that would be of interest to you. That's a lot more impressive than someone just randomly sending me a job that I know they don't fit. Because to me, I'm like, they haven't made any effort, so I don't have time to make any effort back. So part of it, I think, is really being intentional with your search. Send your resume to roles you actually fit. But also, too, is like I had someone ask me, I did another podcast on something similar, and they were asking me to say, I see this role I think I'm an amazing fit for. And I just really interested in this company. How many times is too much to follow up? And what I asked him is, you think you're an amazing fit. Based on your background, do you think that company really find value in what you've done? And he really paused and he kind of said, well, I want them to. And I said, that's amazing. To think about it, they have to find someone who they can also see value in. So if you don't know if you can add value, unless you know someone at that company, those efforts more than likely are not going to get used. Now, let's say his answer was at the office setup. Yes, that company will absolutely see value in me. Then great, send your resume through the normal posting, but then also try to find out who that hiring manager is. Send them a note on just like, I'm interested in this job. It's more of like, I heard you guys are working in the X, Y, and Z space. I have experience in the X, Y, and Z space. I also read this article that you guys were talking about A, B, and C that's interesting. I dealt with that exact kind of issue in my last firm. Love to chat with you briefly if it would make sense. And if not, if you could let me, if you're not the right person, let me know who's a better person for me to connect with. Because if it's not this role, I think I can add value to the firm because of this reason.
Yeah, give them a nugget. Give them something.
Give them something of why is it a benefit to them to follow up with you. But I also think too is people will reach out to people, be like, can I just take you to coffee? Can I take you to coffee? That's a great thing as long as you really are ready to talk about what it is that you can add value, what that you can bring, but also make sure it's a good use of your time and, their time. Because some people are like, oh, I love a free lunch, and they're not going to help you at all, right? So I think it's really thinking about what companies in your space could really utilize you, proactively reaching out to them before you even see a role, but not wasting your time sending your resume to a million places. And then when you do get that interview, really thinking about how can you show the value you can add them, and how when you ask your questions, you're highlighting your intellect, you're highlighting your intellectual curiosity, and you're highlighting what you know about the firm, understanding what great looks like to them. Is when they give you all those answers, they get so excited about you. All of a sudden, then they want to answer all the questions that you really have that you want to ask and that you really shouldn't ask in an interview.
That's super. I love all this advice. I think it's so helpful because I think there's so many people right now, especially you mentioned AI earlier. It's like there's so many people. I just talked to a woman yesterday who was like, I've applied for like 60 jobs. She's like, and she's got a great resume, and she's like, I've sent out like 60 resumes and I got response to one. So I think this advice you're giving is super valuable because it is like a lot of these resumes are just getting fed into AI machine looking for keywords. And I think that that is a tough shift for a lot of people because we have been so used to like just tack on the last job. I'm like just adding to the list, and you gotta it's a different ball game now. Like what people are submitting and what's actually getting caught.
And to your point, like some people in marketing and sales maybe have like color on their resume or they have like a graphic. Those ATS systems just kick it out. and your resume has never even been seen. So do you
Yeah, I'm always really interested in people that like put all the speaking of jazz hands, put the jazz hands on their resume because I'm thinking, I don't think that's helping you get seen. But I mean, but I love hearing it from you because you're the one that knows best. So it's like hearing that like, hey, you don't need the necessarily need the jazz hands. Like that's not going to help you in any way. What's going to help you is performance. What did you do in your roles that really move the needle for that company?
And I know we don't have time to talk about this all day, but the last thing I will say really quickly is pay attention to your LinkedIn. Does your LinkedIn have every keyword? Is your about section really sharing what you can do for a company? So that way recruiters like myself and internal recruiters for companies can easily search on your background. Because some companies, why they're doing this huge ad and they get 3,000 candidates, the people they're seeing are the ones they're proactively going out to. So have your LinkedIn ready, make sure you've got a good picture, all those things. But anyway, I could talk about that for days, but I'm passionate about it. And the main thing is just if you believe, and I know that I don't mean this to sound Pollyanna, but I do think going into a job search, you'd have to believe you're going to find the right place. And doors will be slammed in your face, and that's part of it. So keep putting yourself out there and you will find that right match.
Yeah, it's like the rejection is tough for a lot of people, but it's like that just wasn't your job. That just wasn't the good match, even though it might have seemed like it. I think, another thing too is, and you kind of talked about it with ageism, but you've been very open about the reality of bias in hiring and your desire to use your platform for good. So how do you approach that in your work? Like, especially when it comes to advocating for people who might be overlooked, um, whether that's age or sex or whatever that is, right? Like how do you overcome that?
This is a huge passion for me. You see, I'm trying to like get myself situated in my seat to talk about this. But the idea is that I'm really trying to find out what problem is my client really trying to solve. And what happens with most recruiters is what they're trying to look at is okay, and there's some great recruiters out there, but the client needs 10 things. But in my opinion, how can I really come up with a really interesting, diverse slate of people who can solve that problem? I have some clients who are like, I want to see people from Ivy League colleges only. I want top 10 MBAs only. But how do I look at someone creative, right? Maybe someone from an HBC, right? Someone that is coming from a different background, or someone that maybe doesn't even have an MBA, but based on their experience is so strong. So I'm really there to try to find these unique backgrounds, different kinds of backgrounds that people are normally not seeing. Let's say it's private equity investments. Those majority of them are white males. And there's nothing wrong with white males out there if you're watching. I love you as well. I love everybody. So the idea is how do I present out of 5 people, how do I present exactly what the client wants? And then also really have 2 people who are unique. I still believe they can solve the client's problem. I really do. I'm never going to send someone who I don't think can solve that problem, otherwise that's a waste of everyone's time. But how do I uplift these certain backgrounds in a different way? That really, really matters. But also, this is how, in my opinion, we create better companies. If in the boardroom or at executive leadership, it's the same kind of person that went to the same kind of schools, the same kind of industries, how do we really look around the corner? How do we really solve those problems that companies are having? And if you have a diversity of thought, then to me, someone may have seen around that corner in a different way or get the group to look at things in a different way. But also, too, is sometimes I find these people that are willing to do absolutely anything to get their foot in the door at some of these kinds of companies. And I can tell that they're going to give it everything they have. So I always assess people as accurately as I can, but I always tell the client, have a conversation with me. And if any of my clients are listening to this, they know I say, have a conversation. I wouldn't question this person if I didn't believe in them. And some of those people get hired, some of them don't get hired, but at least they're getting in the room to be able to have those conversations. But it's also my job to help prepare them for how do they discuss their resume. I'm not making them someone they're not, but it could be based on how someone grew up, the college that they went to, the last job they had, that they have not gotten some of these extra steps that someone that maybe went to the right college, has gone to boarding school, have done all these special things, has already bought, or their parents have prepared them for interviews. How do I really help prepare someone to discuss what they've done in a way that adds value to a company? And that's what my job is there to do. But obviously, you can't overly prepare people, otherwise they'll get in the job and they'll do horrible. I do have a very high success rate in terms of, or hit rate is what my clients called it, where I don't have people that don't work out once they join. So I really want to do that right long-term match for both people.
Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question. So I really want to kind of highlight what you do and what you're doing. And you've built such a meaningful career and you're continuing to make an impact in so many ways. So, what are you most focused on right now? How can people connect with you? How can people work with you? Just tell us all things Lisa, all things Korn Ferry. Give us all the information.
Well, you're so nice. And first of all, I always feel a little bit guilty in these situations because what I do is really, really specialized, right? So I'm the accounting and finance headhunter. I place leaders in the accounting and finance space. But what's unique about me that's different than most executive search firms, I also then build out people's teams. So I literally one time could be working an all-in cash job of 500,000, and then I'm also working another all-in cash job of 130. And that's unique. There's not a lot of people like that in the market. So I very focused from a Colorado standpoint. However, what I love is I work for Korn Ferry. And Korn Ferry is the largest search firm in the world. But what we really are, we're a global organizational consulting firm. What's great and unique about Korn Ferry is yes, we're known as being this huge executive search firm, but we are really focused on how do we assess talent? How do we assess leaders and really figure out what's happening within the organization? And how do we really bridge that gap between the talent that they have, the talent they need to bring in, what's happening with the company? So I love it. I worked originally for a company called Lucas Group. I spent 29 years there. Lily Joe from Corn Ferry bought us that I wore black for like a year because I was so sad about being bought. But then I realized, and this is kind of the point about growing, is at my old firm, I was, one of the very, very best, and I really had stopped learning. And now people at Korn Ferry are so bright, and the level of understanding they have of what's happening in companies and how do we move a company, how do we make them more competitive. I mean, we're partnering with the LA Olympics. I mean, how exciting could that be, in my opinion? Amazing. Do a lot of hiring and recruiting for the LA Olympics, but I'm working with a company that demands the best of the best. And so to me, I'm like, I'm really raising myself up and I'm a formal mentor and I also have a formal mentor. And that's kind of exciting at 33 years of experience that I have a mentor, but people are so smart at this company. So for Korn Ferry, if there's anything with your firm that you are looking to upgrade talent, you want talent assessment, you want organizational consulting, you need executive coaching. There's Korn Ferry, literally, we're one of the really only fully kind of completely integrated firms in terms of how do we really move talent and businesses forward. And that is not a commercial. I genuinely really love it. Now, granted, Lucas Group is still alive. I liked it. It was fun being a big dog, but at the same time, it's great to be humbled and have to really push yourself. So it's an amazing firm. So I'm always happy to help someone. I always want to be honest. There's sometimes where I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to help, but maybe I can't. So obviously, Korn Ferry does every industry, every single position, whether you're marketing and you're in oil and gas, you're a CIO, coming from a SaaS company. So we really can help lots of different kinds of people, but we can't help everyone. But I know lots of other recruiters in the market. So always happy to give referrals too if I can, if for some reason we can't help.
And I will make sure that all of Lisa's information is in the show notes. So if you're trying to get a hold, look her up on LinkedIn, connect with her there. And I think the biggest thing that you're saying is that people need to like understand what their strengths are and reach out, like be vulnerable and reach out to people and don't be afraid to say, "Hey, look at me. I'm looking for a job and I'm kick ass. I'm awesome." Like, so this is why you should look at my resume, etc. So again, I'll make sure all of Lisa's contact information and the Corn Ferry's information's in the show notes. I have more of a fun question. So away from work, you've competed in things like Escape from Alcatraz triathlon and the New York Marathon. You're getting your knee replaced, even pushing through injury because you were committed to something bigger than yourself. What drives you? What drives Lisa to keep going in moments when most people would stop? What's your motivation and what to be so fabulous?
So first of all, it's very nice of you to say. I usually joke that my husband now is our stay-at-home golfer, and I need to keep driving to support his lifestyle. But no, he really takes care of me. So I joke about that. But what's interesting is I kind of
Are you looking for an extra partner? Because I think stay-at-home golfer fits what that sounds good. I'm just kidding.
to be. I want to be my husband when I grow up. So thank you. But to the point, I two sides of myself, right? I've got the physical side and the mental side, and kind of this physical athletics, and then professionally. And those are really two different sides. And the reason why I say that is like, I think physically, I grew up with a very, very talented dad. My dad was an amazing runner and cyclist. My sister was a nationally ranked triathlete, sponsored triathlete, and I wasn't as good. I was state ranked, but not nationally ranked. And that really has always pushed me. And I think the same professionally, right? Is I was always good, but I wanted to be great. And so part of it is those voices in my head that said, you are not good enough. We don't think you can have a baby and have this job. We don't, think at the age of, 55, you should still be hardcore snowboarding, which is why I'm getting one of my reasons why I'm getting my knee replaced. And I also need to be dancing on tables because I'm very busy.
Indie.
The idea sometimes are those negative voices that I'm pushing against, but also too is I hate to give up. And I really believe that I was born kind of on third base in a way, right? I was so incredibly lucky. And through Greenhouse Scholars, I was just interviewing a potential scholar, and he was saying how upset it makes him that people can have as much drive and as much potential, but they don't get the same opportunities. And so the way I look at it is I've been given these incredible opportunities in my life. So how do I really drive past? And in New York Marathon, when my cartilage was separating from my hip, I've also had a hip surgery. I didn't stop because I was raising money for this amazing charity called PPMD, which affects mostly young boys. They're usually in wheelchairs by 13, and some of them pass away at 30. I'm not going to stop running if my hip hurts because you have to go forward. So my point is that I'm driving forward for my son and daughter to see them doing, right? For someone on the show that's listening that feels like, gosh, I don't have the leg up that someone else has. I want to be great, but I think by me giving everything I have, I'm giving other people permission to give everything that they have. So partially too, if I'm like being honest, it comes from by a lack of ability. I'm a good athlete, but not a great athlete. So I think my sister would always tell me, because I was always a little jealous of her talent. She always said, pain is temporary, results are forever. And I look at that from my job, for athletics, and I kind of joke, I'm in Chardonnay shape right now, not really athletic.
That's also fun.
The idea is I look at this is I'm not trying to just work so hard so I can have this great retirement. What if I get hit by a bus? But I always joke, but what if I don't get hit by a bus? Right? So how do we just live our lives in this authentic, real way? And to me, just not giving it everything I have, I just feel like would be going against how hard my grandfather grew up in an orphanage. I'm almost crying again. Thank God we almost stopped you crying.
You've done very well. You've done very well.
All my grandparents worked so extraordinarily hard. My grandmother on that same side was a huge business person with people wouldn't want to sell to women. Well, to me, how do I, as a woman, take advantage of the opportunities that I have been given, but also how do I make things better for someone, beyond me? So even now I'm like feeling so fired up about it. But we're all human, right? And I always liken myself to a wave where sometimes I'm just killing it and I do a lot socially and people are like, how are you out again? How are you doing this? How are you doing this? And I always joke, well, I can sleep when I'm dead. But the idea is we only have a certain amount of time. And what do we do in that? But my idea of a wave, but then I also crash. Like Wednesday, I just was supposed to do something Wednesday. I was like, I can't do it. I've got to, stay in and do the things that are going to help recharge me. But I just think, I don't know, what could be better than like having some gigantic crazy vault, like swimming from the prison, the Alcatraz prison that is insane, right? Well, we just mostly did it because my sister and my dad were doing it and I was jealous and didn't want to be left out.
Don't leave me out. FOMO. You had Alcatraz FOMO. And we're so glad. I just like to say for the audience and myself, we're so glad you weren't eaten by a shark. So that's fabulous. And so I'm wearing one of our INTS shirts, You Matter, but we also have a shirt that has a saying on it that yay, all right. We also have a shirt that says and when you were talking about like pushing through and what you've done, I could not get this out of my head. One of our shirts says excellence is not an act, it's a habit. And I think sometimes, especially when we're younger, we think like, I want to be amazing, I want to do this, that, and the other. And we think you do one thing and it's like, that's going to put me there. It's like, no, like, the MJs of the world, the Michael Jordans of the world, and all this, the most incredible people you've ever known, whether they were athletes or otherwise, it was a habit. It was repetitive. They lost a lot. They failed a lot. It was just that they kept going. It wasn't one act. It was a habit. So that just I it just like was screaming in my head while you're talking. Like that is exactly a perfect example of you pushing through, of you continuing to do these things and to build the excellence of all things Lisa. Okay, so on the INTS website, on itsnotthatserious.com, every month we highlight a different whip, a woman in power. And Lisa, you've been one of our whips. Thank you so much. We love highlighting amazing women, and you're one of those. So in the whip series, again, whip stands for women in power, but power can mean so many things. So when you hear the phrase whip or women in power, what does that actually mean to you?
I love that question. Is how I'd answer it now is different than when I was young. When I was young, I would thought, well, that means you have a big deal job and people have to listen to you, and that means you've made it. I look at it now of agency, right? That I have my own agency, that I have accomplished what I wanted to accomplish in order to get here. And obviously, I'm still accomplishing and will continue until I'm like, 99 or hopefully 102. But I look at it as we have power, right? A woman in power that needs to be the opportunity to give back. Everything to me is once you get to a certain point, it's not about getting to that certain point. The idea to me is you've gotten to a level where you have something to give, whether that is being a mentor, whether it's financially giving to organizations that matter to you. But I really look, it means that what I've done, the work I've done has mattered, but then it also means I really can give back in such a cool way. And I love the idea of getting to give, right? Some people don't talk about money. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think you look at money as such a negative thing, but to me, the better I do, yes, I get to have a great life, but also I can give so much more, whether that's time, money, whatever the case may be. So I love the idea of women in power, and it also has a great sisterhood piece to it, which I always appreciate. Is how do we raise up other women's voices, but also all voices, whether it's not just ours, but all voices at the same time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I am so happy to see you, to have you on the show, for people to hear you and know what you do. Again, all of Lisa's stuff will be in the show notes, so you will be able to find it there. But thank you so much for spending the time with us, and see you next time.
Thank you, Carrie.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Carrie, It's Not That Serious. If this conversation resonated, subscribe and share it with a whip, a woman in power in your life. You can find more conversations, more community, and all the fun INTS merch you love at itsnotthatserious.com. We're building something meaningful here, and I'm so glad you're a part of it. Until next time, remember, it's not that serious.